Welcome to Sumita Roy's English classroom. This is Professor Sumita Roy, and today we have a video on literature. The text which we are going to do is a famous play by William Shakespeare, written 500 years ago. The title of the play is The Tragedy of Macbeth. We often call it only as Macbeth. If you look at the title, you will find the word tragedy. Tragedy is a classical form of drama which the great Greek critic Aristotle described as one of the highest forms of drama. The main characteristics of a tragedy is that it is the action of a superhero, a tragic hero. It is a superhuman hero. Here we have the title role, and that is Macbeth. But a sad ending comes to the tragic hero, not because of external circumstances, but because of a tragic flaw within the character. This tragic flaw in Macbeth is his ambition, his desire for power. So this is what we find when we are talking about the play Macbeth. When we are talking about a play like this, we also look at the historic context. The play was written when King James of Scotland became King James I, the ruler of England also. This happened because Queen Elizabeth I was childless. She never got married. She was called the Virgin Queen. And after her, there was a problem of succession. Therefore, King James of Scotland was made the King of Scotland and England, and he was called James I. Shakespeare wanted to write about the contemporary happenings of James I. Therefore, he took the story from Holinshead Chronicles. These were historical chronicles, but the story of Macbeth in Holinshead Chronicle is different from the story which Shakespeare uses in his play. Because Shakespeare was a creative artist, he very often changed the play. The reason might have been that he wanted to please King James, or he wanted to assert that the time of King James was more stable than what an usurper like Macbeth. An usurper is a person who takes away the throne from the real king. These are always happening because even King James had assassination bids when he was the King of Scotland. So we have to keep these points about the background before we read the play. Now, when we read the play, we need to talk about its structure, its plot, and then characterization, themes and symbols, etc. So let us talk about all this one by one. The usual structure of a tragedy, in Shakespeare's tragedy you will find this, in fact in Shakespeare's plays you will find that the structure is a 5-act play. The play is divided into 5 acts, and each of the acts is subdivided into scenes. In Shakespeare's plays, the first act is where you are introduced to the characters, the action, and the main points of the theme. The final act, that is Act 5, is a conclusion. Since it is a tragedy, it will have a tragic end for the hero, that is the protagonist, and it will have a restoration of order. That is the fifth act. The second, third, and fourth act will take the action forward. It will develop the character. All the characters, important characters, will have some kind of development in these three acts, second, third, and fourth. In Macbeth, Act 1 is divided into 7 scenes. It's long. And Act 5 into 8 scenes. Again, it's long because introduction and conclusion, these are very important. They are the major thrust in explaining what is going to happen in the play. You must remember that the playwright can't come in front of you and say anything. The playwright usually talks through the characters. The characters say something, and then you know what is happening in the play. The story progresses by the conversation between the characters, the dialogues between the characters. There is also another way of communication, and that is a soliloquy. A soliloquy is where one character speaks directly to the audience. If there are other characters on the stage, they pretend as though they cannot hear because the actor is communicating with the audience. It is almost as though the actor is thinking to himself or herself. Now let us come back to the structure. I told you that the first act has 7 scenes. In each change of scene, the setting changes. And then in the last act, 8 scenes also, the scene changes. The remaining 3 acts, Act 2, 3, and 4, have very few scenes each. But the major action, the major character development takes place here. We have 4 scenes in the second act, 6 scenes in the third act, and 3 scenes in the fourth act. These are all what you have to keep in mind. Now, in tragedy, whatever devastating events take place are not shown on the stage. Macduff will kill Macbeth, but that is not shown on the stage. Macbeth kills King Duncan. Lady Macbeth commits suicide. Banquo is killed. Macduff's family is killed. But all these are narrated on the stage by characters. You have to remember, these are some of the characteristics which you find well defined in Aristotle's Poetics. So we have to, these are 2 important books, Aristotle's Rhetoric and Aristotle's Poetics. As you go forward, you will know more about them. But today we are talking about Macbeth. So that is the structure of Macbeth with 5 acts divided into scenes. Now we come to the plot of this play. The plot, as I told you, is the action, is what happens in the play. Shakespeare wants the plots to be of contemporary relevance. We are reading it 500 years later. But during the time when the play was written and the play was enacted, it was published much, much later. In those days, the play was first enacted. Therefore, when you're reading the play, when you're reading the original text of Shakespeare, you must keep your mind as a stage and you must see all the action happening in your mind's eye, because unless you visualize the action, you cannot understand the play. We find that Macbeth is a very good, very brave general. He's a great soldier. He has every quality of greatness. But suddenly one day, when they are passing through the field, 3 witches make a prophecy. In those days, witches and witchcraft were a great subject of interest. Therefore, Shakespeare uses it, because if you use something which is interesting, people will come and watch the play. So the witches come and they predict. They say that Macbeth will become the king of Scotland. The major action is in Scotland. There are certain scenes which are in England because the English king promises to help Macduff to revenge Banquo's death and Duncan's death. Therefore, you have settings are different in certain scenes. But now it is in the fields of Scotland, the witch is telling Macbeth that he will be the king. There is already a king on the throne of uh, Scotland, the rightful king. And how will Macbeth become the king? After all, he's a soldier. This is the prophecy. Then Banquo is told that his children will be the king. And here it is possible that King James I was in the direct line of Banquo. That is a possibility. Much has been said about it. So, to please James I, Shakespeare might have chosen to write Macbeth. But Macbeth became one of his most famous dramatic presentations. And it is a very, very serious play, a play which is extremely relevant even today. 500 years later, if you read the play, it still has a lot of relevance because the situation is similar to what happened then. The action might be different, but the situation is the same. So that is the beginning of the plot, the action, the witch's prophecy. Now, when somebody tells you the future, obviously that plays on your mind. Even now, we often look at the stars, what the stars predict. We often look at the palm or we do face reading. There are many ways of, prediction. They say that if you are born at this particular time, then you belong to this particular star and this is your fortune. So it plays on Macbeth's mind. And when he tells Lady Macbeth, his wife, she is equally ambitious. And she says that they should kill the king. The king comes for a banquet. A banquet is a party, very, high level party, dinner, where Banquo, when he's sleeping, is sorry, not Banquo, but King Duncan. King Duncan comes for the banquet in Macbeth's house, and Macbeth kills him in his sleep. There is a beautiful quote about killing sleep. Many of Shakespeare's creations, many of his sayings have become famous quotes today. You can read the original play, you will get the benefit of all that. Now, Lady Macbeth, although she instigates the husband to kill the king and become the king, is unable to bear her guilt. She keeps washing her hands, thinking that there is blood on her hands, and says that all the perfumes in Arabia cannot wash off the stains of blood. She becomes totally mad. Madness was a very important point, a very important theme in many of Shakespeare's tragedies. And then, of course, you have uh, the next point where Macbeth, although he's the king, he is extremely scared. He is paranoid. He feels that he will be murdered and the throne will be taken out of his power because he's very power hungry. And therefore, he starts killing people. his best friend Banquo he has murdered. Unfortunately, he is unable to kill the son of Banquo, although the plan was to kill the son also. But this doesn't happen because the prediction of the witches is that it is Banquo's sons who will become the kings of Scotland later. Now, Macduff, who wants to establish the order of the right of kings, the divine right of kings, it is called, where the king's own son can become the king. So there is Malcolm, who should be the king. Now, Malcolm is not the king. Now it is Macbeth who's the king. So Macduff takes it upon himself to fight to stop Macbeth from killing people one after another, and Macduff kills Macbeth. Therefore, he takes help from the King of England and does this because the King of England is also very eager that the divine right of kings is not violated. Because in one country, if there is rebellion, it's bound to happen in another country. If you look at the map, you will find England is here, Scotland is here. So it is a map like that. Then, obviously, if there is trouble in Scotland, England also is threatened. Anyway, with the help of the king, Macbeth is dethroned and he is killed. Malcolm becomes the king. At this point, we find that some kind of an order, some kind of righteousness is established in Scotland. Here it differs from the original story in Holinshead Chronicles, because there Macbeth ruled for a long time and he was a good king. He was not a king like this, a despotic king, a king who is become mad due to his power and he misuses his power. So this is the plot of the play. The plot of the play is divided into scenes in various acts, and when you read the original play, you will find how this is clearly indicated. Now, the difficulty in reading Shakespeare is that some of the spellings are different from how we spell it today. For instance, tragedy is spelled as D-I-E. Now, T-R-A-J-E-D-Y we say. So that D-I-E spelling is there. Many such spellings are there. Some words which we use today might have changed their meaning, although the form is the same, meanings have changed. So when you read the original, you have to keep in mind that you are reading a language which has evolved. Shakespeare brought many new words into the English language. He was a great creative genius, but some of the ways in which language was used in those days and is used now has changed. Although that is modern English, 16th century was modern English, but in spite of that, between 16th and 21st century, there are changes. That is why people find it difficult to read Shakespeare. But once you read one text, if you take the trouble of reading one text, you will find that it is much easier to read the others. You can read the complete works, which is a big volume, and then you can enjoy the greatness of this dramatist. Now we move on to characterization. A very important question is characterization. If you are studying Macbeth for your school examination, I'm told that it is prescribed, or your college examination, then you might get a question on the character of Macbeth, or Macbeth and Banquo, Macbeth and Duncan, Macbeth and Macduff. Comparative study also you can get. You can get characterization of Lady Macbeth, although she's not there in much of the action, but she is the tool of the entire action. She is the instrument in the play. Therefore, her character is very important. Then you also have minor characters who you might not be questioned. The character of the witches, or the importance, the significance of the witches, is another question which might be asked. Suppose you are preparing for UGC NET, etc., and Macbeth is one of the texts prescribed, then it is enough for you to know the basics. You need not go into long discussions of any of them. The basic information about what is the play, how the dramatist deals with this play, these are important. So we have the characters whom I've already mentioned. Macbeth is a character who starts off by being a great person, but he digresses into a very evil person because of his ambition, because of his hunger for power. Macduff is a person who is, eager to have the morality established back again. King Duncan is a good king, but he is also not able to survive the plotting of Macbeth. He is unaware. He doesn't realize that Macbeth is making such a terrible plot. Banquo is killed thinking that Macbeth is his friend, but he isn't. Then you have also Macduff's family who's killed because of the Macbeth's evil designs. All these you have to remember when you are writing the characters. Some characters are drawn in opposition to one another. I told you, Macbeth and Macduff. These are called foils. So when comparison is given, you must remember that characters who are foils of each other, they are the presence of Macduff makes you realize how bad Macbeth has become. That is what a foil is all about. Now you must realize that the next very important point is the discussion on the thematic significance of the play. What are the play's themes and what are the play's symbols? That is, these are 2 points which we are going to talk about quickly now. The themes, as I have been mentioning to you, ambition is a very important theme here because we talk about Macbeth. Ambition must have been there within him, but the witches bring out this ambition, and therefore the entire action of the play depends on this theme of ambition. Ambition is clearly related to the seeking of power, the enjoyment of power, the thinking that we want more and more power, which is so relevant even today. False ambition, desire for power which is misused, is happening everywhere in the world all the time. People who want power can do anything to get it. That is what Macbeth does. And that is the theme which we have to pay a lot of attention to. I also told you that the supernatural is important. Not only are the witches present, the witches are supposed to be people who have supernatural powers because they can predict the future, and the future became real for Macbeth, but also the ghost of Banquo. Macbeth is haunted by the ghost of Banquo. Today, psychologists or psychiatrists might say that is the subconscious mind of Macbeth which is troubling him. This visions he sees, the hallucinations he sees, these are all symbols. They might be symbols of his disordered mind. That is a possibility which, the psychologists of today might say. Shakespeare's time, there were no psychological documents. Freud came only in the 19th century. But Shakespeare was very well versed in human psychology. His plays are full of it. So you find that the theme of supernatural includes the psychological dimension also. Then you have the theme of evil, good and evil, or morality and the breakdown of moral values, order and disorder. All these are discussed by using the superhero, this tragic hero Macbeth, because Macbeth starts off with good and then he converts himself into evil because there is something impelling him to do it. And here the role of his wife is also important because she keeps instigating him to take power, to get power by usurping it. Usurping is pulling the power away from the real person to whom the power belongs. King Duncan's power is taken away by Macbeth. So you find this also is a theme. The restoration of order or the restoration of morality is what is the role of Macduff. Macduff is the one who does it. Innocence, unawareness, loyalty, and deceit, these are also very important themes. You will find them when you read the characters closely. There are symbols like sleep. Duncan is killed in his sleep. So I already told you, says murdered sleep. That is because after this, neither Macbeth nor Lady Macbeth can have peaceful sleep. Sleep is supposed to restore us, but this sleep is denied to them. Then there is the symbol of blood. There is the symbol of the dagger, the weapons, the symbol of witchcraft. These are all powerful symbols. Blood implies the kind of violence that is there. One of the qualities of tragedy is that the action is violent. Unlike the comedy, where you do not have such violence in action, the term tragedy and comedy do not mean as they mean today. The concept of tragedy and the concept of comedy are defined in a very clear and complicated manner. But that would require separate videos. So maybe we shall do literary terms in some other videos. For the time being, you must understand that the action which is very violent becomes a very significant point of tragedy. Because the tragic hero is killed and the tragic hero deserves to die, we call it a tragedy. The end of the tragedy tells us that the death is not undeserved. Today we might say it is tragic or it is a tragedy when something is undeserved. But that is not Aristotle's definition. Aristotle's definition is that the downfall of the tragic hero is because of a fatal flaw or a fatal mistake which is inherent in his character. And that is why he does not deserve to continue. In this way, Shakespeare recreates the character of Macbeth, he reinterprets history, he puts it in the terms which are acceptable in his contemporary times. Now, when we are reading the play, we have to see its contemporary relevance. If in 2024 we are talking about the play, then you must remember that in these hundreds of years, certain things in the play have not changed. For instance, you have the role of Lady Macbeth. There is a saying that behind every great man is the hand of a woman. Now, great here is within quotes. What is the definition of great? You have to understand. Great might be evil also, greatly evil. Therefore, Lady Macbeth becomes an instrument of evil. And that is her role. That is why she commits suicide because she cannot accept her guilt. Half the play deals with this guilt in Macbeth and in Lady Macbeth. All these lead to the tragedy. Therefore, the title, The Tragedy of Macbeth, is suitable for the play. And that is where we end our discussion on Macbeth. I have given you some important pointers, but you have to read the play first and you have to think about all this based on your reading of the play. Then you can flesh out all these points. I have just given you a few points. On each of these points, you can write one full essay if you have read the original text, if you are familiar with all the acts and scenes which Shakespeare himself has written. Thank you and all the best.